welcome back everybody to Tuned In with Jim Cummings. Today we have a very special guest joining us, Reid Moon, and we're here in your store out in
Welcome to Provo, Utah.
Thank
Provo,
you.
Utah.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's gorgeous here. I haven't spent much time, but I think I skied here once a million years ago. Pretty good skiing, and there's a heck of a bookstore here.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you've been aware of that.
I'm not a Utah native. I'm from Dallas, Texas, but I've been here the last 8 years, brought my bookstore here, and it's been very well received.
I would imagine. Well, it's just beautiful. If you're ever in the neighborhood, in fact, if you're not in the neighborhood, be in the neighborhood and come here. It's part history. It's a lot history, and I can't imagine anyone in the world walking in here and not being utterly fascinated by more than 5 or 6 things.
Well, we try to have a little bit of everything, and we tell people we're a museum disguised as a bookstore.
Yeah.
And we just try to make it fun for everybody, and we do have something for hopefully everybody who walks in.
I guess you do. I mean, we could spend an hour on each wall. So, yeah, it's amazing. And I suspect you're kind of like myself. Things that I liked to do, I turned into a living, and you clearly enjoy.
Yes, I went to college not knowing what I was going to do, changed majors 4 times, everything. I just wasn't seeing it.
Yeah.
Went back to Texas, got involved in the family business, but we did have a small community bookstore, service to the local community. We were in kind of a outskirts of Dallas, and started dabbling with it when I got back. My dad had a big insurance agency, but I hated calling people trying to sell insurance. But if somebody came in to talk books, I would jump up and go help them.
Oh.
And this is mid-'80s, pre-internet. People would ask for books that were out of print. And I'd go, well, I'll see if I can find it. Write it down on an index card, and I would go physically looking for the books. That's how all of this started over 3 decades ago.
Really? Wow.
Well, if you think about it, how could you find an out-of-print book pre-internet? You would have to go to, if you couldn't find it in your local bookstore, you would go to the downtown public library where they had yellow pages from every major city. And you would go to the bookstore section.
Remember those?
You would go to the bookstore section, and then you would send them a letter. And they would not respond to you unless you included an SASE.
SASE, that's right.
Self-addressed stamped envelope. And if you wanted any copies, you'd have to literally tape in a quarter or something. But and just that whole process, it could take weeks to find out if a book was available.
Wow. And now those letters are probably valuable themselves to an extent. Oh, it's just wonderful. It's unbelievable. If you're ever in town, wow.
Well, and if not, there's always the social media you can find. And we realize that not everybody's going to make it to Utah. So we, put it out there on social media.
A little bit out there to them, yeah. It's just, I could, repeating myself, but I'm just flabbergasted. And some of them have to do with some characters near and dear to my heart. You got some from A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard.
Yeah, E.H. Shepard and A.A. Milne were buddies before Winnie the Pooh.
Oh.
Before. They knew each other. And then they decided to work on that project together. We are coming up on 1 century since those books came out.
Wow.
And, but to find so there's your first step, find first editions. But the iconic images that we have of the characters, that's all E.H. Shepard. That is from his mind, how he envisioned it. And, 100 years later, you say Pooh, you can envision it because of E.H. Shepard. But yes, they were buddies. And we were talking earlier about how they were supposed to do a Mother Goose project.
Yes. Could you talk about that a little bit? That is, in fact, if there's any way you felt like reading something, that would be very interesting.
Well, I actually have a letter that A.A. Milne wrote to E.H. Shepard telling his thoughts about that project.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And-
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Let me see. Oh, just a sec.
It's
And
just amazing. Oh, fantastic. Well, this was one of my favorite things. Of course, I have a personal connection, I guess, to an extent. But can you preface, please, tell us what we've got here, what this particular incredible treasure is.
so it's a little letter in very petite handwriting by A.A. Milne. And they got distracted by this little project called Winnie the Pooh for a few years. And that's what they were focusing on.
Yes.
But he had signed a contract earlier, back in, let's see, just before they were going to start, to do an illustrated book with commentary by A.A. Milne and the illustrations by E.H. Shepard. And the Winnie the Pooh books are starting to come off the press, and the publisher comes to him and says, you remember I gave you that advance for that Mother Goose project?
Mm-hmm.
Well, after he got that letter, he sits down and he pins this letter to E.H. Shepard and says the following. And not that I can do a British accent. You'll have to figure that out in your mind.
That'll be fine.
And this is how he starts out.
This is so good.
Will you think me an absolute cad, writes Milne, if I chuck Mother Goose? By which I mean that I retire and that you do an unannotated E.H. Shepard Mother Goose for Methuen and McCrae by yourself. And because Milne had signed a contract March 1926 for a selection of Mother Goose rhymes with his commentary. And they were going to split the royalties 50-50. But he got distracted by Now We Are Six, the book.
Right.
And he goes on to say, the truth is, I have never been keen about it. That the idea in the first place came from the publisher. You know, it wasn't my idea. They came to me. And he goes, not only do I hate doing that kind of writing, that is not its own reward. It gives me no pleasure. And I am convinced that I can't do good work unless I am enjoying it. This damn goose has been more weight around my neck than any albatross. And there are a dozen things I want to do. And always this beastly book gets in the way.
Oh, man. Sure. Yeah. Right.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah. So where are you going with this?
And he goes, I am at the moment in the middle of a novel, which I long to get back to, and it is sheer prostitution to chuck it for a measly bird.
Yes. A goose even.
Yes. And then, but Milne said, hey, Shepard, I'll write the introduction for that book, but you do it. And, you know, I hope I'm not ruining things with my rotten comments about the book. But he says, for God's sake, relieve my mind on this matter. For if you feel badly about it, I shall have to do my damnedest, and it will be undoubtedly damnable.
Oh, man.
In the event, neither Milne nor Shepard completed the project, and we have been able to find any evidence of that. So to have, and all of these letters were donated by E.H. Shepard's wife to the Victorian Albert Museum. So you just don't see these letters. And so that's just a fun treasure to go along with the other A.A. Milne Winnie the Pooh items that we have here.
Wow. And that is the actual letter.
Actual original.
That just cracks me up how he says this damn goose. He's just talking trash
I know.
about Mother Goose.
Mother Goose, this damn goose. Honking. Oh.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've spent this time here with my hands in my pockets because everything looks kind of sacred to me here. You know,
I think one thing that books are very approachable, accessible, and they're meant to be handled with your hands without white gloves. I always get chastised using white gloves, but they've done studies that shown more damage being done inadvertently trying to use gloves than they've ever prevented. So the international standard is clean, dry hands.
Well, I'm glad I just washed my hands. I can take them out of my pockets now.
Yeah. So, we have in front of us the 4 Winnie the Pooh books, all first editions.
All first editions.
And a couple of them signed by
And
A. Milne.
yes, I know. Now, in which order were they written?
They were written now. It starts out.
Now We Are Six.
Now We Are Six.
Mm.
Then it goes. Let's get them in order right here. We have multiple sets.
For an uneducated person like me, a first edition, that means that's the first printing of
It's
the book?
the first printing, and they were very good. Remember, we mentioned earlier that it was 1927 for Now We Are Six. It'll say first published, and then if it's a later printing, it will go on to say 1928, 29, 30.
Mm-hmm.
And so how many books would they have printed in total in like that first printing?
The first printing, a typical print run back then on a book like this is 5,000 or so.
So very limited.
Yes. Although somebody like Mark Twain was very cocky, and he goes, my first edition will be 30,000. So today that means a first edition Huckleberry Finn doesn't sell for as much as some of the other books. Whereas you have some books, well.
That's true, isn't it?
But even for modern times, it's surprising that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, they only printed 500.
Really?
They didn't even have, if you're printing 500, you don't even think it's going to sell.
Yeah.
No.
And they only did 500 knowing that the British library system would buy 300 of them to cover the print cost. And so Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, a copy of that set a world's record for price of a 20th century novel. One sold at auction for almost $500,000 for a book that's 25 years old.
I heard something about that because in the United States, it's called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I heard that they did that because they didn't think the American audience would know what a philosopher was. Do you know if that's true?
It's absolutely true. It was more, they thought it would affect sales.
Yeah.
It originally came out in June of 1997. It's October 1998 when the American edition comes out. And the author, J.K. Rowling, agreed. She regrets it now, of course, and because every other language, it's the Philosopher's Stone.
Right.
All the translations, only the American, in essence, dumbing it down.
That just cracks me up.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, they didn't want it to be Harry Potter and, the Aristotle's stone or something. That didn't want to dumb it down with that philosopher bit. Oh, God.
Oh.
Jeez. And I love the fact that, we're hearing these priceless artifacts, and yet Reid will just go, okay, well, now here, this thing here, and he throws it across, and and it's like, don't let it touch the ground. Quick. It's pretty amazing.
And I have to correct myself because it is actually When We Were Very Young is the one that came out first.
Oh, okay.
When We Were Very Young.
Yeah, I thought that
1924.
was bugging me, so I'm glad you
I know.
cleared that.
When We Were Very Young is 1924.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
1924.
Oh, we're coming up on an anniversary.
Well, and actually, that when they saw that this went out, that's how they got the contract to do the Mother Goose in 1926.
Oh.
Because it's 1926. And then by 1927, they're doing the Now We Are Six. They had done that, and they're still talking. They haven't done anything by 1930.
Whoa.
They finished the Pooh series. Because
So without Pooh, there
Now
was-
We Are Six is 1927,
Wow.
and the Winnie the Pooh is 1928.
Wow.
No, 1926. 1926. And then the final, The House on Pooh's Corner, is the 1928. So we've got
Kenny Loggins.
24,
favorite.
26, 27, 28. So
would it be fair to say that without this little bear, that damn goose wouldn't have had a funding? Or was it the other way around?
well, Mother Goose actually had been around for a century. Because, it goes back. There's...
Folk tales. I would
yeah,
think,
yeah.
right?
It had been around
Yeah.
for a while. They knew it would be somewhat popular, and this is the 20s, the Roaring 20s, and they just thought it would appeal.
Yeah, they needed something wholesome back then.
Yeah.
They were fresh out at the time. That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's
My
incredible.
gosh.
Like Jim said, this whole shop is just so full of treasures. It's so interesting. You were showing us earlier, King James's King James Bible, his personal,
Yeah. How about that? some guy named Shakespeare wrote something, and
Speaking of which, I didn't show you show you my oldest Shakespeare.
See,
Can you tell us about it?
Well, so Shakespeare, or as my wife would say, the guy who took credit for the plays, because she does not believe that he wrote them.
Yeah.
there's a lot of that, isn't
Yeah.
there?
Mhm.
Or there were like 4 or 5 people, or
Well, she says, okay, why is it that the most famous author in the English language, there's not one piece of paper with his writing on it, like not a letter, not a fragment, not
didn't know
anything.
that.
There's like a christening deed and land deed. There's a couple of signatures of a William Shakespeare. But I mean, it's almost like we have letters from Genghis Khan.
Mhm.
We have letters that are 2,000 years old. But the guy from the English language, there's not a letter to his wife. There's not a letter to anybody. There's nothing. And now there's no doubt William Shakespeare was very involved in the producing of the plays. The question is, why did he get the credit? Now, that's like turning a cruise ship around in a river to get but they will always be the Shakespeare plays.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it is one of the most collectible books, period. The first time Shakespeare dies in 1616. The plays are mostly written 1590 to about 1610. And Shakespeare dies. King James is King of England from 1603 to 1625. And Shakespeare dies in 1616. Well, 1623, during the reign of King James, the first folio or the first printing of Shakespeare comes out. There's about 200 copies in the world, almost all institutionally owned.
they were all.
Well, from the printing press.
Now, how old was he? How long a life did he live?
Till his 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he had time to get out a few.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, he's in his 60s. But there's literally no writing. But it's friends of his who publish it, and they're calling him Shakespeare's plays because he's the one helping produce them and everything. But the question is, well, where are these manuscripts? How can manuscripts just disappear? Nothing in his handwriting.
You'd think that would have been something they'd hold on to.
Yeah, you just didn't get rid of it.
Jeez.
So, a copy recently sold. I've seen 2 copies sell in the past 2 years. One for about 8 million and one for around 10 million. So it's,
Wow.
I don't have that one, but I do have the second impression. I tell people it's the poor person's $1 million copy.
Oh, yes. Well,
But I do have that right in the diamond vault. I can pull that out, but it's one of the finest surviving copies. It's just flawless. It's a stunning copy.
Really?
And it's nice to have. That a book can survive 4 centuries, survive countless wars, and moving around and still be in really good shape 400 years later.
Continents.
This is the 400th anniversary this year of the printing of Shakespeare. It was 1623. We're 2023.
Wow.
Wow.
And they still made me take 5 classes on him in college. 400 years later.
That's not a bad legacy. So what are your personal thoughts about that? About the
I tell people on almost everything according to my current understanding.
Okay.
Oh, here's the other thing. They've done word print analysis that show multiple authors, like 5 authors, and I don't think you can't just turn that on, turn that off.
Yeah.
Wow. People have this subconscious use of their wording can be, identified by, if you get a letter that's not signed, a lot of time just by the usage of words, you can identify the person. Known.
Sure.
So the fact that Shakespeare plays show multiple authors, I tend to lean more along that. But I tell people it doesn't detract from they're the Shakespearean plays.
That's true.
They're ones associated with him. They have his name.
Right.
But also, they were only printed 4 times during that century that he died. Those are the first 4 folios. By the turn of the following century, then it becomes a staple, and it hasn't been out of print since. But they would go decades with only doing, and there's fewer than 1,000 overall copies from the 1600s, like those folios. I think there's about 200 of the first and about 250 of each of the others. So, and so 950 copies, of which 900 are institutionally owned, a few dozen in private hands. So it's very rare to have that.
Oh, it sure is.
Yeah.
And you're down to your last 300 or 400, aren't you? I would just
Had a few pass through the store.
Yeah.
But we have, the second folio, 1632, which I think is the most beautiful on the interior, just the way it's done. Stunning.
Yeah, books are they're like pieces of art in and of themselves. Even not even reading them.
And the Winnie the Pooh wouldn't
of
be the
their
same without
time.
the illustrations.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
This prompted a child's or the reader's imagination to see those images. We were both in an event this past weekend, and I'm showing a lot of these books, and I had a first edition Winnie the Pooh there. And people would get very emotional seeing it.
Oh yeah.
It's like, wow.
I would
And
imagine.
I think many were surprised that it was almost 100 years old. I think a lot of people thought it was 1950s or so that came out, or more the Disney era.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've experienced that. Now, were you the original one? I go, no, that was someone else. But I've been around since the 80s. So it's just fascinating. And what have we here? The Wind in the Willow?
Well, no,
The
World of Pooh.
Yeah.
So A.A. Milne's son, Christopher Robin, went on to own a bookstore.
No, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He had a
And
bookstore.
where was it? Let me guess. In Essex or no? No, was it Sussex?
Well, think water, think coast.
Okay.
It was in
The Isle of Wight. I
Well,
don't
it was
know.
Dartmouth.
Oh, okay.
It was there. He had a bookshop, and occasionally people would come in. Hey, you're Christopher Robin. I'll buy one of your books, and can you sign it? And in 1971, somebody went into his shop and had Christopher Robin Milne sign a copy of The World of Pooh, and that's his bookstore, the 9th of June, 1971.
Wow.
I think he died of late 70s, I believe. But again, the E.H. Shepard, and there's a newspaper article in here that had a previously unknown photograph of Christopher Robin with the little bear.
Oh my gosh. Can we show the camera that? Can we see that? How we do?
Yeah.
That was undiscovered. That is an undiscovered photo.
Wow. Just wow.
Well,
And can we show? Let's show the camera that picture as well.
there it is. Christopher Robin Milne.
Wow.
Wow.
Although,
Wow is right. I'm going to be saying wow a lot.
well, and I don't think we did an up close of this. Here's Winnie the Pooh, signed by A.A. Milne. And in case you didn't get a close look at this, that is all about Mother Goose. Him wanting to chuck Mother Goose.
That
right
damn
there.
goose.
Right there.
The only person in history who was pissed off at Mother Goose. That's I had to put up with this.
Well, and another thing we looked at but didn't talk about is, authors and illustrators like to keep copies of their own books. This is actually E.H. Shepard's copy, and he signed it right across from that iconic image of Christopher Robin and Pooh on the bridge.
Yes.
That is just iconic right there.
Wow.
Can you tell the story that you told on TikTok about how Pooh, how it originated?
The origin
the
story?
origin with
Sure.
the bear and yeah.
Yeah. Well, it goes back. The fact that these were printed in the 1920s, between 1924 and 1928,
Means
The
it
or-
had to happen earlier.
the origin story is earlier, and it was World War II.
So World War II, not
Oh
one?
no, sorry, World War
World War
One.
I. Oh, I
So
see.
you go back the previous decade. It's World
Sure.
War One. Soldiers in Canada were enlisted, and it's like make your way to Europe. Well, so they're hopping a train. They're going along. They stop at this one train station. and there's a guy with a bear on
Yeah.
a leash, and this one
Like a
young,
chihuahua. Or
yeah,
something.
this one young man, he wanted to be a veterinarian and everything, and so he's fascinated with animals. And who can resist a bear cub? And he goes
Oh, yeah.
over, and the man said, I trapped the mother, but he goes, I couldn't kill the cub. So I just brought him here to the train station to try to sell him. The guy goes, how much? And he goes, $20. And so
Sounds like a lot of money.
That was,
Yeah.
but bought the bear, and then he takes it on the train with him. And then they make their way.
It was a service bear.
Well, if I had a nickel for every time I did that, I'd have a nickel. That's crazy.
Well, and they take it all the way, and then they get to a port where they're going to be shipped off, and they allow the bear to get on the boat.
Yeah. That's the one that got me. It's like, wait, what?
And then it goes all the way over to the UK.
Yeah.
And it's there, but by the time he gets his assignment to go to the front, they go, you're not taking that bear.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, maybe leave the bear here.
And so he
gosh.
goes to the London zoo and says, hey, I've got this bear.
Yeah.
And maybe I
they
could
said,
leave
so
it
do
here.
we.
And they go, okay, yeah, that bear, people like to see bears. What's the bear's name? They says, well, got him in a train stop in Winnipeg. So we call him Winnie. Winnie. And so that name stuck. And so the bear was called Winnie. And who went to visit that zoo? A.A. Milne with his son, Christopher Robin. And the bear, they even allowed people to sit on the bear to do bear rides. I mean, it was quite domesticated.
Different, yeah.
And
Different era.
And so it was the big attraction. And after the war is over, this young man comes back and sees how beloved the bear is. And he goes, I can't take it. It's got to stay. And so it stayed. It lived for over 20 years at the zoo. Yeah. But that is kind of the back origin story of Winnie the Pooh. And so his father writes that, but that's obviously after they've gone to the to the zoo to see
So
this
how
bear.
did we get from Winnie Peg to Winnie the Pooh? Is there where'd the Pooh come from? And please don't forget the H.
Yes.
Yeah.
His father, there were other animals and other that were in use. I'm not 100% up on all of my Pooh lore, but there were several of the names got tweaked and changed and during that time, because like a lot of parents some parents, they tell their kids a story and then it kind of makes its way and gets bigger and bigger but then you have to set it. And it's like, okay, here's the final version of it. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it all came from a visit to the zoo.
A visit to the zoo. And
After a heck of a trip to get there. For the bear, anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, I never knew that he was from Canada. And I remember thinking, I didn't know they had bears in England. Do they? They don't, I don't think.
No, and if you think about the other time there's a big story about a bear, it's Paddington Bear. But it's a Peruvian bear.
Right, that I knew.
Yeah.
Peruvian bear. I didn't know they had them there either.
Well, that's just it. I've been to Peru 15 times. I've never seen a bear. But been to Machu Picchu.
Well, he obviously moved to England.
Well, yes, but
that's why.
Yeah, there you go.
That one did anyway.
Yeah.
Machu Picchu. Yeah, Machu Picchu, the little bear. My goodness, what a story. And then Disney bought it somewhere along the line.
Yes,
I guess. Way back when.
But one interesting thing is the first edition of Winnie the Pooh is public domain now.
Oh.
But the images, Disney has the red sweater, which is their patented version. So
Yes. Well, I'm glad they did. Personally, I'm really glad. I've got that sweater at home. No. But I can't tell the story about stealing them. She can't do that. Never mind. Okay, next subject. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. Yes, I did. But but this is I just, boy, if you're ever here in Provo, this is the place. Do you just have people that this is like a pilgrimage,
We do.
Mecca?
We do. We actually have people call up and say, if I fly in, is Mr. Moon going to be there?
Yeah.
But yes, now with social media, I mean, we have people. It was in May a few months ago when high school was getting out. Numerous high school graduating seniors asked for their senior or their trip to be a visit to this bookstore.
No
Really?
kidding.
They didn't want to go
That's really interesting.
to
Yeah.
Disneyland or whatever. They wanted to go
Right.
visit a bookstore. And the parents, how can the parents say no?
Yeah.
You want to go see a bookstore?
Wow.
So we try to make it special.
Well, congratulations, you've done it. Yeah.
Well, and we have had visitors from all 50 states, over 50 countries. We know that from our guest book when people sign it. And so all 50 states are represented
That's awesome.
and 50 countries so far. And I think it'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, I would think. Absolutely.
Yeah, our goal is just to get people excited about reading again. And I see that in the comments many times. I haven't picked up a book since college,
Mm.
but you've gotten me to pick up a book again and
Yeah.
get
Wow.
excited about reading. So it's very rewarding to see
Mhm.
that social media can have a positive influence on people.
Definitely. And I mean,
Boy.
I don't think we're giving the listeners like the full scope of just like how incredible this store is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just a bookstore.
to
It's,
do.
you know, there's artifacts. You have artifacts from the Titanic, from kings and queens and, you know, dresses. You know, we were just walking through here for anybody who's listening to it. I mean, there's facades that look like, you know, just like, where did you say the brick flooring
The
was
brick
from?
floor is from France from the 1700s. That's the time of Napoleon and Marie Antoinette.
Yeah. You have strands of Napoleon's hair.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so fascinating.
A little bit of history. We try to have something that is tied to almost all aspects of history within the past, at least 500 years.
Mhm.
And we have books in over 100 different languages, so we can cover that.
Wow.
We have all the high points in literature, from
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings to Gone with the Wind to Bambi to you name it.
You have the Barbasol can from Jurassic Park. I mean, that's like one of my favorite movies ever.
We have a lot of fun movie props. That's it started out about 10 years ago. We started getting into pop culture
Yeah.
more as an entertainment for those who come to the shop. My daughter signed me up for career day at school it'd be about 10 years ago because she's a senior in college now. She's in 6th grade. She signs me up
Yeah.
for career day at school. And I said, "What'd you tell the teacher I do?"
Yeah,
Like a bookstore owner?
right,
And
right,
she
yeah.
goes, "No, I told her you're a treasure hunter." And,
Okay,
and
that's
it's like,
that's
okay.
that's
And
better.
I said, "What did the teacher say?" And she says, "Well, she wanted to know whether that meant like sunken ships or whatever." And
Oh,
I-
okay. Yeah.
And she goes, "No, I told her you're like Nicolas Cage, a national treasure."
Okay.
And then the teacher says, "Wow, some little 12-year-old has a very high impression
Ooh.
Impression of her father." And so the teacher mockingly introduces me like this: "This is Mr. Moon, and his daughter's very proud of him. Says he's a treasure hunter like Nicolas Cage."
Mm-hmm.
And we'll now turn the time over to Mr.
So-
Moon.
Oh, here we
And
go.
So the first thing I pulled out of my bag of tricks was the treasure map from National Treasure.
Yeah.
That was found in the Resolute desk, and it's in that
Yes.
vault right over there. But yeah, so the one they pull out, I've got the treasure map.
And then just for good measure, you gave her a lashing with Indiana Jones' whip,
Yes.
right? Which, by the way, you have. He's got that.
From Temple of Doom, yes.
Temple of Doom. My gosh.
Well, and the teacher saw me do 3 things, and then the teacher stood up abruptly and left the room. Left me alone with the kids.
yeah. She said, okay, I've seen enough.
And then she walked back in with the principal, and I go, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble."
Oh,
And the principal came up and whispered, "Mr. Moon, this is the best career day ever.
Oh, okay, good.
Can you stay and do it for all 6 grades? First, second, third, fourth, fifth,
that's
sixth, because the kids are so quiet. You've captivated them. They just
Yeah.
can't get enough of it. So
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
that is
rightly
awesome.
so. Well, that gives me faith then. Good. I was worried you were going to say, Mr. Moon, stop feeding these kids all this BS about, no, it's true. It's true. That's incredible.
You cannot forget to say what the desk is in this room. We're sitting here looking at this desk, and you explained to us when we got here that it gives you inspiration. What is
Yeah,
that
when
desk?
I went to write, I sit at this desk because, well, this is a man who broke away from his publisher after he'd published several notable books. And they kept
Yes,
wanting
he
to
did.
edit his items. And he says, hey, I'm the writer, leave him alone. So I'm
Yeah.
going to start my own company. And he chose a name out of Shakespeare, some words out of Shakespeare all the year round. So he started a new company called All the Year Round in 1859. And he had the idea for this really good book. And it ended up being his all-time bestseller. And he sat down and wrote these words. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. That is the desk where Charles Dickens would have written A Tale of Two Cities.
Actual goosebumps. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and you say, well,
Yeah.
how do you know that? He had a desk at home. This was his business desk. He's a writer.
And that was his business.
And the very first item, volume 1, number 1, Tale of Two Cities, published, serialized over time. So
Yeah.
that's
So
a
cool.
well-documented desk. So, and then I also have his business lease for that space.
Oh, boy.
I have the candlestick that was at his home, and his caretaker, his sister-in-law, Georgina Hogarth, said, this is what was at Mr. Dickens' desk when he would write. Because during Dickens' lifetime, no electricity.
There was no, yeah.
So it was all by candlelight or daylight.
Or, yeah.
Wow.
You got up early.
And I have his whiskey flask.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I mean...
Is it full? No. Okay.
So, yeah, those are
Wow.
things you don't really know exist, but then when you come across them,
Yeah.
it's like,
Super cool.
Wow.
that would be fun to have in my bookstore.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
So that's the museum aspect. Are you a museum? Are you a bookstore? It's half and half.
Yeah.
Have to sell a few items to pay the bills, but
But you've also turned down
I've-
a very big offer. Can you tell us about that?
well, let's just. I
Which
don't want-
one, right?
Well, okay. I have a few books that it always infuriates. Let's say very wealthy people who are used to buying anything they
Oh,
want.
sure. Yeah.
When I tell them I won't sell them a book,
Yeah, ooh.
and and I have a grouping of books that belong to some notable figures in history. I don't want to say exactly, but
Mhm.
that I've turned down. Well, on one of the books, I've turned down $10 million. And
Can you even start guessing out there, world?
yeah. Well, to give you an idea, other books that have sold for $10 million, Washington's annotated copy of the Constitution, a first folio of Shakespeare. So it's, you know, and there's more than one there are multiple people that want these items. But I'm a collector too. There is pleasure and enjoyment in owning rare books and to have them around. I walk into this back room and I am very comfortable not talking, not listening to anything, just looking at the bookshelves because every book has a story. I can remember, I literally, like children, I can remember everywhere. I remember where these books came from.
That was fascinating when you were showing us around in here. I was like, you just know where things are. You can bring up something, and that was so fascinating to see.
Well, and that, since we're on the subject, or we were, of Charles Dickens, that was a question asked to him. What is your favorite novel? And he said, well, that's like asking a parent, who's your favorite child?
Oh.
But then he paused for a second and he says, but in every parent's heart of heart, they do have a favorite child. And he goes, and mine is David Copperfield, which was the most autobiographical of all of his works. So,
Wow.
Really cool.
Just amazing.
Do you have a favorite item or book in your store?
I always say my favorite is the one I'm looking for
Yeah.
because I love the hunt. That's part of the story. But I've done a few like TikTok videos. These are my 5 favorite. But it's time to do it because now it's shuffled. I pick up something new and it maybe pushes one out. And my list could change daily. I mean, there are a few that are always going to kind of be there. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, so I love Lord of the Rings, and I have a signed first edition set, and that's always in my top 5. Lord of the Rings signed. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Wow.
But also like the original shooting script for Star Wars has made it into my top 5. It's the copy that belonged to Roger Christian, who literally made the lightsaber.
Wow.
So, and won an Academy Award for Star Wars. To have his used set with doodles on it is crazy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you say, well, that's not a book. It's got pages in it, and it reads, and it's a story. So that's one of them. So,
Yeah. What about you, Jim? You have a nice collection of stuff at home. Do you have anything that's your favorite, your personal favorite little artifact?
Oh boy. Yes, I lifted some Pooh and Tigger from a set of a movie a few years ago and got in trouble. And but I can't talk about it. Of course, no, I think I let it out of the bag. But yeah, I've read a few. You know, when I first started doing this, I was gosh, like 30 some years ago, and I thought I better start saving all my scripts because these are going to really be worth something someday. And then I saved up a whole trunk of Dumbo's Circus scripts, which is the first one I ever did. And it just got to be so voluminous, I couldn't move it around anymore. So I started giving them away. And now I just want to shoot myself. So, because who knows? I mean, maybe it would be worth something, maybe not. You don't have any of them here, do you, by any chance? Dumbo Circus scripts. But I do save some of my Winnie the Pooh scripts now. So
no, but I did until recently, but some huge Disney fan came in. I had,
yeah, they're out there.
I had actually a copy that is from Walt Disney's personal collection. I mean, it was his copy of one of the scripts with his annotations changing the script. It was the year 1954, the year Disney World opened up, and it was one of the TV scripts.
54, okay. Like Davy Crockett or?
No, just a sec. It was like Pluto, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I know him. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but yeah, well, Disneyana is very collectible.
Yeah.
Signed Walt Disney. A lot of people don't realize that's what his signature looks like. I mean,
oh yes,
that's
it's very much like that.
It's very much like the iconic Walt Disney that you see. And so anytime, I'm always picking up Disney, but they tend to sell about as quickly as I get them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would imagine.
But what I was going to say on favorite books, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a valuable book. Sometimes it's just a book that you found. I still have a copy of The Three Musketeers I found on my honeymoon. We were in a little...
Oh.
And I'll never sell that. I mean, it's not even that it's worth that much. I just remember I was surprised in a little small town of Camden, Maine. I walked into a bookshop and they had a 150-year-old copy of The Three Musketeers.
Wow.
And it was $20. And so,
okay.
So I was like, so
you take it.
I have fond memories.
Now, there was a rumor, I don't think it was a rumor, I think it was substantiated, at a garage sale. I want to say in Missouri or somewhere like that, maybe about 15, 20 years ago, the other copy of the Declaration of Independence showed up on the back, and it was not unlike a picture frame you'd see on your wall, and they were taking it down, and there was some sort of picture of, Jack and Jill or just something had nothing to do with anything, and they took it apart because they wanted to reframe it, and they go, oh, what's this? They go, oh, be darned, it's the Declaration of Independence. And they took it in, and it was real. There were 2 copies. Does that ring a bell?
Well, there were actually multiple copies.
Oh, really?
There were multiple copies that were printed at the time.
Mm.
That's why every decade one will surface. I mean, there's the, one first the original,
Sure.
but there are copies of many documents. There are multiple copies.
And they were able to copy them back then. No, it was what,
Well, they were
Gutenberg or
no, done by hand, and then about 40 years after, then they took the one reason the original is in such poor condition is because they decided to make a copy of it. And so they got it completely wet and put it on this stone, and it lifted a lot of the ink off of it.
Ooh.
And then they made replicas of that are exactly, because you lifted part of the ink off.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Well,
but back
that'll do
then,
it.
copies could be made by mimicking it, and there were people who could do that. In these older books from the 1700s, and even old Bibles, you'll see they're etched into steel. Originally, it was wood. So in wood, you can't get the details you can in steel or copper. But eventually, they got better and better. But the earliest illustrations you see in books are called woodcuts, and pretty
that's
basic.
right. Yeah.
Then by the time you get to the 1600s, they have the ability, they're doing steel and they're very fine, and copper engravings. And so you look at some of these big books, you'll open up to the front and it's just these gorgeous illustrations. So, and that's a work of art in itself.
Oh, that's for sure. My God, it's just so fascinating.
Yeah. You have a large collection of Bibles, correct?
Have about, within 50 feet of us, there's about 280 Bibles from the 1400s all the way up to on the iPhone,
Yeah.
But
Wow. Yeah.
But all the early ones, I mean, the very first complete book printed in the Western world is the Bible, and it's known as the Gutenberg Bible. And everybody thinks it's a German Bible because of Gutenberg. No,
Gutenberg.
it's Latin.
Sounds like it.
But it was in Latin because the Bible was only printed in Latin since about the 4th century. So for 1,000 years, it's only in Latin. So the Gutenberg Bible is Latin. Latin was the language of the aristocracy and the learned and the clerics.
Sure.
And that's approximately 1455. And for your listeners, here is your vocabulary word of the day. There is a word. Somebody can walk in my store and they say, and instead of saying this whole long drawn out, do you have a book that is printed from the time of the Gutenberg Bible until the year 1500? There is one single word that means it describes any book printed 1455 to 1500. And they would walk in and say, do you have any incunabula? Or do you have an incunable? The Gutenberg Bible is an example of incunabulum, but that kuna middle part means cradle, which means in the infancy of printing. They're basically saying, do you have a book from the infancy of printing? When they say, do you have any incunables or any, that's a book printed for.
Wow.
And an example of that would be the Nuremberg Chronicles
That's
or the
very
Gutenberg
interesting.
Bible. But we have examples of that here. So those are the earliest books, but by no means the oldest writing. We have cuneiform tablets here that go back 4,000 years.
That was amazing. You showed it to us, and I just wouldn't have known. Yeah, there's no way. I mean, looks like a little, something you'd find in a stream, and it's got some scratching on it.
Yes.
It's
Cuneiform's like the first alphabet, but just like the Roman alphabet, it can do many languages. This one is in Sumerian, but with all of the research and everything, and over the years, they know how to translate this. And the one I showed you was actually an invoice for a large shipment of malt barley. 26 talents, which I think equals about 3 tons of malt barley.
Have you paid it yet? It's really overdue, you know that.
Long overdue.
Oh my gosh. Now, who would that have been to and from?
Well, it showed who did the delivery. It was more a record to get paid.
It was Lenny, wasn't it? Wasn't Lenny delivering back then? I don't know.
Yeah, it was just
That's
like, hey,
crazy.
look, I have delivered over there to that town by the pyramid 3 tons of malt barley. I need to be paid. Look, Omar signed for it.
Wow.
I mean, it's literally gives the name
Wow.
of the person who did it.
Dang.
Wow. Tell him Mark Anthony sent me. You know, what do you do? I mean, that's living history. It's just
Well, yeah, it's amazing these things have survived. And you say, well, what will last 4,000 years from now?
uh,
What will people look back? Oh, this is 4,000 years old. Well, what will survive 4,000 years? That is a rock. It was actually kind of clay, and it's carved and then fired, and so but it could have shattered.
Mm.
But once it's fired like that, it can get wet,
mm,
and
Oh.
it's still okay because it's been fired.
Yeah.
So and you keep away from getting crushed, it's going to last another
Oh, yeah,
4,000
sure.
years. But if you just take clay and carve into it, it gets wet, it's going to eat away and it'll be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty sophisticated if you think about it, going back 4 centuries to figure
Oh
it
yeah.
out.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's incredible the technology that's been around. I mean, we were just in Pompeii like a couple months ago, and it just blew my mind like how they had plumbing and crosswalk. They had everything thought out. They had pizza ovens there, and they look exactly the same as today. You know, it's like the same exact
That's
pizza
pretty good.
oven, and you know that's 3,000 years ago,
Yeah.
and it just blew my mind. I was like, what have we made in the last 4,000 years? You know, what is new? I feel like it's the internet and digital technology, and other than that, we've kind of, you know, haven't really stepped too far.
Well, the fulcrum and the lever still works.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Unbelievable. And you showed us some things here that the thing that kills me is that you look at something and you don't know what it is, and then it turns out to be priceless. You know, it's like that joke. It was in Indiana Jones. Take off your wristwatch and bury it for 1,000 years, and it's priceless. And your collection here is truly priceless.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well, if you were to go through and itemize everything and put it on a list and then go to somebody with unlimited funds and say, can you get me this? In 25 years with unlimited funds, you would not be able to go replicate what has been acquired. Because many items are one of a kind, many items are one of a kind. And so, or there's a few, and certain books just don't surface, but once every 2-3 decades. So, yeah.
What would be an example of that people might know?
Well, okay, let's say you have somebody say, I want you to go out and track me down some hair that belonged to George Washington that is authenticated, maybe with a notarized affidavit from his family.
Well, if I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me that, I'd have a nickel.
Well,
Wow.
so I have George Washington's hair that was a gift to his niece at the time of the inauguration. His niece, Jane, got that. It's passed down in the family. And a century ago, the family says, you know, great-grandma Jane, this was given to her by Uncle George. It's documented, signed, notarized, everything. With items that you can't write on, like hair, to have that documentation is just insanely rare. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one random thing. Well, I have a book I have a book of magic, one of the oldest books in English on magic, but it's Houdini's copy. You know, and so if you say, well, can you find me a 400-year-old book on natural magic, the one translated from Italian by Jean-Baptiste Porta, that's written about him? No, because there's one. It's in the Diamond Vault.
I'm shocked. Astonishing.
Well, I can keep going, but
astonishing. Well,
Please
please
do.
do. Yeah, that's
I showed you Marie Antoinette's prayer book.
Yes.
And
Got
as
some
I told
mileage out of
you,
that.
it was never let them eat cake. She never said let them eat cake.
Yeah. What was the quote?
The quote in French is "qu'il mange brioche," and if you understand brioche is a sweet bread, and so the original one was let them eat bread. No, let them eat sweet bread. But the English translation made it even more sinister.
Yeah, that's right.
You think of the icing and cake, and every time you see it, but she was executed in 1793. she was able to give away a few books to family and friends. So very few, maybe a couple dozen in the world, are in private hands. In the vault, I actually have 5 of her books that we are well documented from her library.
Wow.
She was a big reader, wasn't she?
I
Good
actually
writer.
have another book called The Library of Marie Antoinette, which lists all the books from one of
Oh
her
my
2
gosh.
libraries.
Wow.
And that is a book that actually belonged to J.P. Morgan, but it was released from his library. So all these books have a history. You follow it along. Now, it wasn't a book that belonged to her, but it was a book about her library, of which they only made 25 copies of that book. So that's a book you can't even go get that book.
Yeah.
And you can't go get books that belong to Marie Antoinette.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, there may be one service, but really I think I probably have the best, her prayer book.
Mhm.
It's a book of mass that you would follow along with.
Mhm.
And it changed according to the time of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
You would follow along.
Wow.
There's another book you showed us earlier. Are you willing to talk about that one, or do you want to stay away from that?
Well, I would probably stay away from that one, needless to say, but
Mhm.
let's just
You
say
have good guys and bad guys.
there are good
How about
people and
that?
bad people in history, and I collect the history of the world through books.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're telling the history of the world, there are good people and bad people.
You're stuck, yeah.
And some people may take offense to that, but it's just like we can pretend it never happened,
Yeah.
or we can tell the story honestly. This is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's very impactful on those who hear the story
Mm-hmm.
or see something that ties to it. They will never forget that.
Yeah. We talked about something similar on one of the episodes of Jim's podcast. We were doing, I forget what we were deep diving on. It was one of the deep dive episodes. And, Disney has started doing this thing where, instead of censoring, old cartoons or stuff like that, when times were different and people had different mentalities, they'll kind of just put like a warning at the beginning, kind of notifying
was
the
of
audience.
its time.
Exactly. And I really prefer that, I think. And Jim, you can share your thoughts on that. But I think it's better to just put the warning instead of censoring things out.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I've done a post, let's say on George Washington, and they'll say, why would you dare do that? He was a slaveholder. And he founded the country, and he this.
Right.
Yeah, well, he did a few other things too.
Yeah.
Well,
if we do a deep dive on anybody's life,
something's going to come up.
then we're banning all books because
that's
every
right.
person's got a skeleton, or every person's got something they did that somebody's going to be offended by, realistically. And so that's why we tell people we're a museum. I said, there's no museum in the world that you'll go to that you will. We're telling the history of the world, and the history of the world is filled with a lot of bad stuff that happened.
Heroes and villains.
And the question is learn from it. And if it's done...
That's right.
And it's not any glorification by somebody, but it is something to tell the story. You look at the founding fathers, and you can find a lot of things that you will not be happy with. So it's just like, where do you draw the line? We're out here to tell the story, and just take it for what it is. It's a story. Hopefully you learn from it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's something to learn from. There are plenty of things that are outlined. We should do things this way, that way, this way. And let's not do this again. There's something to be learned from that.
Yeah, it can be here's a story. It's a cautionary tale
Yeah.
of somebody. But also, we tell stories here that have never been told. Like, finally giving somebody the respect or recognition that they deserve. If you have 10 minutes, it's almost like I can't do it unless it's...
Sure. Please do.
Okay.
For instance,
there's a man... I would love to get this question on one of those game shows for the $1 million.
Jeopardy.
Who was the first person to enlist in the Union Army? That's just one detail.
Wow.
Like
That's
That's okay. Well, his name was Charles Pomeroy Stone. Yeah, I don't know who that is. Okay. Well, let's just go on. Let's go back to his history. 1847, he graduates, I believe, number 6 at West Point. Okay, respectable out of a class of a couple hundred.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in 1847? The Mexican-American War. So he goes off, serves that ends pretty quickly. He ends the war, rank of colonel. He goes back to Washington, D.C. 13 years go by. And then they're expecting a little bit of trouble in Washington, D.C. There's going to be the inauguration for a new president that nobody's heard of hardly, but the Civil War is not yet happened, but things are looking bad. And they recruit this guy to be like Secret Service or like bodyguard for Abraham Lincoln, and to be over security along the parade route. So he does that. And he got 50 sharpshooters and snipers. Everything went off without a hitch. Flash forward 2 years. The Battle of Ball's Bluff. The North was routed. Now, just to show you things haven't changed, what happens when something goes wrong? They hold hearings. Well, they hold hearings to find out how could we lose hundreds of men in one battle in 2 hours, And when the details start coming out, well, it was pretty much the fault of the general who ignored the intelligence and walked into an ambush. The general happened to be a sitting U.S. senator, Senator Baker. And his fellow senators are lamenting this fact. Oh, hand-wringing, what can we do? Well, Secretary of War Stanton, whose signature is on the wall over there next to Abraham Lincoln, Secretary of War, says, this guy named Charles Pomeroy Stone, let's blame it on him, because I don't like him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Basically, I don't like him because I told him to arrest somebody. And
it's his fault.
Well, I told him to arrest somebody, I think in Maryland, because they had slaves. And he said, is it illegal in Maryland? No. Well, when it is, I'll arrest him. But it's not illegal.
Yeah.
He's obviously a Southern sympathizer. So blame him. And so they arrested him, but went against all military protocol and did not charge him. And this story didn't blow over. So they said, send him up to that prison, that military fort up in New York. So they got him out of town. And they says, make his life miserable, put him in a 4 foot tall, 4 foot wide, 6 foot long, like cage, basically.
Yeah.
And 1 month went by, 2 months went by. What? If you're not moving around, your health is going to start going downhill.
That's right.
Yeah.
And 6 months go by. And then
That's
somebody is saying, wait, we're not getting, and did I tell you Charles Pomeroy Stone was a general himself?
Okay.
A general, and his fellow general is saying, wait, what are you doing? If he's a traitor, I'm a traitor. There's nobody more loyal than this guy. People were standing up for him, but he got caught in this political firestorm.
Right.
And he took the fall. He is the scapegoat of Ball's Bluff. In fact, there is a New York Times article called The Scapegoat of Ball's Bluff, where I found a lot of this information. It's researched. In fact, they said the greatest stain on the North during the war was their treatment of Charles Pomeroy Stone. But still, nobody knows his name, but we're not done.
You're right.
Well, they get a law passed that said if any military personnel are being held, and they've been held for over a month and not charged, they're to be released no matter what the charges are. It goes across Lincoln's desk. He signs it. And then who has to enact the order? Stanton. And Stanton says, yeah, we'll take care of that. Left on his desk another month. Have you been in New York City in August? Try it with try being in a little cage.
Yeah. Ooh.
Well, he finally gets released. He goes back and he wants to get involved in the war. And then Stanton goes, you haven't been involved in the war in 7 months. You're not qualified. You're not, made his life miserable to the point where it boiled over into the family. They got a little 6-year-old girl, whatever, but the wife died in large part due to the stress she's feeling. And so now he's with the little girl, and that's all he can take, and he's about to have a nervous breakdown. And so he goes, all I've ever wanted to do is serve my country. But if that's you don't want me to, then I'll resign. And good, don't let the door hit you out bat and says, see ya. And so he's out. Good luck getting a job if everybody thinks you're a traitor.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, sure.
Right.
Well, there's a visiting dignitary from Egypt, and he's lamenting the fact that, he likes somebody to train his soldiers and everything. And one of his Stanton's friends says, not Stanton's friends, but Charles Pomeroy Stone says, I know a guy through no fault of his own who would be perfect. And so Charles Pomeroy Stone takes his daughter and goes to Egypt for the next, I believe, 16 years. He's a civil engineer. First thing he does, maps out Egypt accurately, gets the borders, gets their military up to spec. They love him. He's doing all these projects. They don't want him to go. They have a change of government. They give him the title of Pasha. They don't want him to go and everything. But now his daughter, flash forward 16 years, she's in her 20s. It's time to get her back. They go back to America, 1883. He's not home more than a week or two. Who comes knocking on the door? U.S. government.
Mm.
And he's thinking, great, now what? I told this to my daughter's 6th grade class, the whole career day thing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that was one of the things I'm telling. And I said, they said, Mr. Pomeroy Stone, your name keeps coming up as being this very qualified person for this engineering project we want you to help with. And I asked the class, what would you say? And all the kids says, no way. And he says, hey, all I've ever wanted to do is help out my country if I can. What would you like me to do? We need your services for 3 years. Mm-hmm. I can do that. We need your engineering skills. I'm a good engineer. We got these 210 crates from France, got to be assembled. We want you to be the chief engineer for the Statue of Liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And so Charles Pomeroy Stone spent the next 3 years doing that. What's the first thing he has to do? He needs a base for it.
Got to put up
France didn't send the base. They sent the parts.
Yeah, they said,
take care of your own base.
Yeah.
He determined that he needed 8,000 cubic yards of stone for the base. Now, you can Google that. You won't
got
find
that
it.
laying around.
Well, the only thing, it was a year purchase order. And you can Google that. You're not going to find it. The only way you're going to know that is if you track down the original purchase order, which I have in the Diamond Vault. On the stationery, American Committee for the Statue of Liberty, where he says, I need 8,000 cubic yards of stone. And
how would you even know that? I mean, it's just, okay.
Well, that's just it. See,
Yeah.
I acquired the document because it's a Statue of Liberty document, and you don't see those.
No.
I mean, that never surfaces. And I said, I got that. And then I find out that the actual backstory is more interesting than that.
Yeah.
But you combine them together, and that is an insane acquisition.
What a progression of
Well,
what
and
a life.
I've always said that would make a great movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Somebody's struggle, showing that whole rise, the Civil War, and then being imprisoned, and then rising, and then getting this job. And then I've always said the final scene of that movie would be and then they had in 1886 the unveiling. He was the grand marshal for a parade to have the unveiling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're honoring him.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first ticker tape parade in New York.
Oh, wow.
That was the first one.
Jeez.
Every other one has copied that. That was
No
the first
kidding.
ticker tape parade.
Wow.
And the question is, why don't people know this story? All the time he's doing all of these great things, he's suffering ill health from being imprisoned in that little house. And he died within 3 months of that being done. And the fact that he was gone, the rumors out, and that story kind of never got, and he kind of just fell by the wayside. Nobody knows that story. And that is just a fascinating
you're right about
story. How does it happen? By finding a document and then learning the backstory and realizing, but here's the final scene of that movie. He's on top of the Statue of Liberty. And he's kind of looking across the bay and everything. And within 1 mile is the military fort where he was held. He can see it from the Statue of Liberty, where he was held for 7 months.
That just gave me the chills. That's such a good story.
Well, and in like 1961 or whatever, they did another bridge. That whole island is now like one big, part of a bridge, but that's where he was held.
Wow.
Wow.
within 1
That's-
mile of the Statue of Liberty. See, that's an unknown story.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, so that's 1 out of 10,000 stories in this
Yeah.
bookstore.
Wow.
Oh. Phew. I'm flabbergasted.
Yeah, seriously, that was quite a ride.
And
And see, history is filled with
can't
that.
even hear.
Well, and there's
don't
good
even know
people, there's
about this
bad
fella.
people, and some of the characters but then there's all these other people that are rising from just like insurmountable odds.
The
to
kind of Monte
succeed.
Cristo is in
Oh.
there a little bit.
Well, yeah. And so I've been there a couple times on school trips with my kids, and I've told like the school group the whole story. And you go there, and there's a sign: Charles Pomeroy Stone, Chief Engineer, Statue of Liberty,
Oh, okay. Wow.
Civil War veteran.
Hmm.
And I've told him, you can ask the park ranger if they're ever going to apologize to him. And of course, nobody knows. They say, "What are you talking about?" I don't even
They
know.
don't even know what
But
you
it
mean.
should say Civil War veteran, screwed over, imprisoned,
Yeah.
never apologized to.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Well,
he didn't hold it against anybody.
Yeah.
He just,
See, how do you not be bitter?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm bitter for him. My goodness, that's astonishing. And you've got a few of those around here. Stories like that.
Lots of stories.
Lots of stories.
But that's
My
what
goodness.
that's what people like nowadays. I mean, people enjoy a story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
Tell them
yeah.
a story. Well, and really, what our books, they're stories. It's other people telling stories.
sure.
But sometimes we just want a story told to us.
Mhm.
That's right. Well, I think you and Ken Burns should get together and start churning out story after story. I mean, gosh, nothing's more interesting than true stories. I know Paul Harvey used to start out, you remember him, I'm
The
sure.
rest of the story.
There's the rest of the story. And it would always be very interesting. And then he'd say, and that man's name was Alexander the Great. And you go, oh, okay. So it wasn't a guy named Al shooting pool down, but there were kind of inklings of that in that story. I mean, something you're barely familiar with. Turns out it was a world beater.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, they're certainly surrounded by them here.
Yeah. Do you have any stories? I know you have quite a bit of memorabilia of Pablo Escobar. Do you know any good stories of him?
Well, I actually go down to Colombia once or twice a year.
Mhm.
And I work with a humanitarian group. And I was visiting with a family, and I saw they had a wanted poster on their wall for Pablo Escobar. And I knew I had to have that.
Mhm.
It's just like I know it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I want that. And they go, oh, no, that's our. I pulled out a $100 bill, and they says, oh, would you like this wrapped up?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
So I got
$100 bill.
$100 bill. I got that Pablo Escobar wanted poster. And then recently, it's the last thing you expect. I walked into a bookshop. When I'm not at this bookshop, I'm visiting other bookshops because you never know what they're going to find. And this one was up in Portland. And I looking through, and I saw this book, and it's usually not typically what appeals to me. I mean, I could tell it was recent.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it, and it's 1990s, 1991, whatever. But when I saw what it was and thumbed through it and saw that it was a self-published book by Pablo Escobar, I go, what is going on here? Because this is when he's in prison, in his prison palace.
Prison palace. There's a phrase you don't hear very often.
He's in every newspaper in the world. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, and he thought it would be interesting to, acquire a bunch of these, and a lot of them are from Latin America, but all of these caricatures and editorial cartoons. And so they're all like hundreds of them put together, and he published a small run of these from prison. And then he gifted them to people. And I have one that is inscribed by Pablo Escobar with his thumbprint and signature and signed by several of the lieutenants. I mean, all of whom are dead now.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's now 30 years since he was killed. I mean, 30 years ago in a shootout. But you know the name Pablo Escobar.
Oh, yeah.
30 years later, and to have something inscribed by him that he published. of which
That he published. There's a varied career.
it shows him as the publisher, and the preface is very interesting too, because he's talking, he's kind of giving his back, or the reasons why he did what he did, and he goes, "Don't lay it all at my feet, because I'm not the one using all the stuff I'm selling." And
Yeah.
he
Yeah, if
goes,
nobody was buying, I couldn't be selling.
yeah, he just says there are more people involved in this, and but apparently I'm getting all the blame. But and here's all these caricatures and everything.
Yeah, well, it's
and-
always good to have a face for the evil, for the bad guy.
yeah. But
Right.
I've been down in Medellin, and nobody says a bad thing down. I mean, because he was he was Robin
Oh, I
Hood.
heard he was.
He
Yeah,
was like Robin
that's
Hood.
right. That's right.
I mean, he was taking care of.
Hmm.
Well, but again, I did a TikTok on this, and I got, "You are glorifying a monster and a murderer." It's like, I'm telling a story. I said I'm telling the history of the world through books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The history is the history.
Yeah, this is what happened.
If it's glorious, it is. If it's not, it's not.
And here's the thing: I'm just going to continue to tell stories.
Yeah.
because for the most
Well,
part,
you've got a few of them here. That's for sure.
I do have unending content, because I could never leave the room, and 3 years later I will have not done a story on everything that's just
Then you'd be on the
visible.
second shelf.
Yeah.
Right. My goodness. Well, now, did you, as a young man, was this your passion?
I
Were
was
you
not
voracious?
a reader.
I was going to ask you that.
I was not a reader growing up. I only remember reading 1 or 2 books for fun as even a child. I would
These
look
weren't
through
Superman comics, right?
and they weren't even Superman comics.
Okay, good.
No. But it's like once I got out of college, and my family had this bookstore, and my family had a bookstore service the community. It was small. It was like grassroots community bookstore. My dad had an insurance agency, and over in the corners of the books, here's what would pay the bills for the books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, my brother went back, started working the insurance agent. My dad says, "There's a job for you here." I changed majors 4 times. Nothing was clicking. Nobody told me you could be Nicolas Cage, and so nothing seemed interesting. But what was interesting, people would come into the bookstore, and I would go talk with them. And they would say, "I'm looking for a book that talks about this." And I'd go, "Ooh, that's cool. I had never thought about that." And then I realized I don't know half the books I'm selling here. And so, but I could read and comprehend. I could read 2 pages in a minute with 80% comprehension, which meant I could read a 200-300 page book in a few hours. And so I started taking home
That's
a book
wonderful.
a night. I started taking home a book a night. And for 3 years, in 3 years, I read 1,000 books to catch up, to kind of
Whoa.
feel like I could be conversant with people. Now
Well, congratulations. You're doing fine. I have good news. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
That's
my current
fascinating.
pace, I still love to read. My current pace is, maybe 8 to 10 books a month. But here's one thing that I found, and I'm reading a lot of nonfiction because I found that history, like they say, is stranger than fiction.
Yeah,
just
I'll buy that. Yeah.
just our own history without even delving into
Into Europe.
fiction.
Oh yeah.
It's just fascinating. And so when I'm reading this, I find now that now I'm looking for what I don't know. Like if they're talking about, it's like, okay, and it's just this grand timeline. Does this replace what I know? Is it better documented? If so, there's my current knowledge, And so it's just, and the fact that it's cross-referenced to so many other things, then you know that the timing and everything, you start learning, who was the King of France at such and such a time? Who was, president?
Louis the somethings.
Yeah. Yeah. you know that, Louis the 14th, starting in the 1600s. And then, by the time you get to Louis the 16th, you're to the late 1700s. Well, what's going on in late 1700s? You have, the French actually were very, were watching what was going on in America at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true.
And they actually published a translation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and some other things.
Interesting.
And it wasn't, who was the fellow that was so fascinated with the American Revolution from France?
Lafayette.
Yeah, was that? Yeah. Well, yes. I was thinking of Toussaint Louverture. No, he was
Tocqueville.
Yes, yes, Alexander de Tocqueville, right?
Yeah. Well, so back here in the room somewhere, I have a French copy of that was published at the time. But this book is then inscribed as a gift from Francois Mitterrand to a U.S. senator.
Oh.
So I was just like, okay.
Oh, okay.
So that was the book that was over in France, and then
Francois
Mitterrand
laying around.
says, I'm the president.
Yeah, sure. Here you go.
Here's a history of your own country. We were kind of seeing what was going on a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's its own little story right there.
Yes.
That book.
That really is. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, truth is not stranger than fiction. It's better.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that brings people here are our books on witches and the occult.
Mm.
I mean, people are just fascinated. All of a sudden you get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
When you tell them, I have this book here called Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of the Witches. It is the most sinister book ever written. It is the book that brought about all the witch trials and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for 250 years, over 100,000 people accused of witchcraft. So I didn't say 100,000 witches were, no, 100,000 people accused of witchcraft.
Of course, yeah.
But it was the witch hunting guide. How to identify a witch, how to break spells, how to prosecute, how to torture, everything. It's a 1,000-page guide.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Well,
some of the things that I used to, the Salem witch trials, and I think Monty Python had their own way of mocking this, but, they would dunk them and hold them underwater. And if they drowned, they probably were good, and it's like, well, wait a minute. So they were innocent, but, and if they stayed alive, they were witches. So they had to kill them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so you're doomed either way.
Yeah, you're kind of screwed.
I have a document from the time of the Salem witch trial that is signed by John Hale, who was the preacher, who's the religious guy, who's kind of instrumental in rounding up everything. And, they're starting to they're starting to kill the witches. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, his wife is accused of being a witch.
Whoops.
Oh.
Damn. Didn't see that one coming.
And then
just kidding.
That made him stop and think, wait a second, I know she's not a witch. He goes, wait, are people being accused that aren't witches?
Uh-huh.
That was the end of the Salem witch trials, because he goes, I think I'm going to back out. And other people says, yeah, I'm not too comfortable doing this either. And
yeah.
That was literally the end of it. When one of the main guy's wives was accused.
That would do it.
Yeah.
And he goes, wait, I'm with her all the day, and she is not a witch.
She hardly ever curses
all it
me.
Was taking
She cusses me out, but right, that'll happen. But
but literally all it was taking a lot of times was an accusation.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh my God, guillotine.
Well, they say you're accused, and it's I'm not guilty. Well, that's what you would say if you were guilty.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You're truly doomed if you either way. My goodness.
I mean, that's just one small area, but you just start covering and the fact that you can name almost anything, and we have something, it just intrigues people. They're just fascinated, because what it boils down to it, and believe me, we have over 50,000 people a year come through this bookstore of all walks of life and everything. And a lot of people you would think, judging a book by its cover, they wouldn't be interested, are some of the most interested,
Mm-hmm.
And I have quite a few interesting conversations on the plane, when I sit next to people, because you can get into a conversation.
Uh-huh.
Although I've noticed since COVID, not so much anymore. I don't think people talk as much, but used to talk all the time. But
My goodness. Now, I have to ask you, because more and more, we were talking at the convention with a few people. That I know that I've seen a UFO, uh, and I just did, and I'm pretty sure I saw two in my life. And do you cover that here in the store as well? I mean, witches, we're getting out there now. Witches, vampires,
Okay.
UFOs.
Well, I tell people, you can name any person, place, event within the past 500 years, and I'll have something
Sure.
that ties to it within no more than 1 degree of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not make them happy, but I can walk into that secret room and I can pull out the original shooting script for E.T.
Oh, okay.
Now, that
Well,
may
he was
not
an
have done it for you,
extraterrestrial.
but
Wow.
but as far as like, if you think about it, that's more digital. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have books, like I have a very old book on the Loch Ness Monster. These books on the subject tend to lag behind, especially now with everything digital. It's all digital. There's hardly anything like you're going to say printed, or unless you get some of the documents. Now they're finally starting to talk about it.
Right.
But as I pointed out, we had the Oppenheimer movie come out a few months ago. I do have over 100 documents from the Manhattan Project. And it's going to be some documents like that somebody's eventually surfaced that says, yeah, Area 54, whatever.
Yeah.
Then that.
So what's the inside story here?
Yeah. As far as UFOs, I can't say I have. My wife, 100,000%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with her. Let's get her in here. Let's get her. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Jeez. So what are your thoughts? And do I dare ask you're just like,
whether there's
you're
UFOs?
Switzerland on it, or?
Oh, I'm probably more. Oh, I'm definitely believe there's UFOs. The question is, I just haven't seen that it's from like another. Like, I still think there's totally,
just because they're unidentified doesn't mean.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Just there's a lot of stuff we just don't know, and can things be manipulated? Sure, and
I would think, yeah.
but I've talked to too many people I know. Like, I've talked to a lot of people who have seen it. Like,
oh yeah, yeah, they're out.
Don't
they're
drink,
out
don't do it, and it's just like,
yeah,
wasn't asking for it, and then all of a sudden, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Is this? So
yeah.
But and I definitely, I mean, I have good friends who are all in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm all in
Yeah.
for what it's worth.
Strangest thing I've ever seen is I was driving from the airport at LAX. I was coming back from college one time, and I'm driving, it's just regular traffic, and all of a sudden, like, the entire sky just flashed green. And it was the weirdest thing. And I remember looking around in like other cars, like, did anybody else just see that? Like, what in the world could that? And to this day, I've never had any kind of explanation. Like, there was one thing I saw online where sometimes like the hydrogen in the atmosphere or something, right when the sun's setting, it'll cause a green flash. But it was like, but like the whole sky just like a lightning flash, but green. And it was the weirdest thing.
And it wasn't
I've ever
Green
seen.
Lantern, the guy with the ring.
Well,
Okay,
when I was 12 years old, I got a telescope. I've always been fascinated with, looking at things out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the most unusual experience I had with like the universe, I was driving from Texas here to Utah, and I was going through southern Utah, Moab, Canyonlands with zero light pollution.
That's right.
I mean, you can see everything. And I got out of the car, and there's no moon, there's no anything. And I could not even see my feet. It was so dark.
Whoa.
Okay.
I could not even see my feet. And I mean, there's a few low mountains and everything, and the stars were going there. I literally lost my balance because it was like I was floating, and I had no frame of reference because the stars, I could see stars like below me almost.
Mm.
And for like 10 seconds, I am so disoriented. I am looking around, looking for anything to grab
To
a hold of
orient
because
yourself.
the stars were the most vivid. I didn't know you could like I'm just 1, 2, 3. There they are. I mean, you can count them all. I literally lost my balance. There was like as soon as I turned what is it? I think I shut the door to walk around, and then it's just completely dark.
Ooh.
And like I could not see anything. There was nothing reflecting. Just it's all black. It's like black and then stars. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
No UFOs though, but that would have been the time though.
I was waiting.
That would have been the time.
I was hoping.
Then I would have been all in.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, but yeah, I'm fascinated with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just I think we all are to an extent because we don't. I don't think we all really want to be that alone in the universe, and I don't think we are.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't.
You know, it's too big.
It makes
big.
zero sense to me
Right.
that what just this one little place series
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
everything.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
and-
all you got.
And when you get pictures from the Hubble telescope, and we can't even like a pinprick is
Yeah.
our galaxy
Yeah.
or our universe. So something's got to be happening out there.
Yeah. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, there's a lot happening here. That's for sure. My goodness. I just have great admiration for you and your passion. When did you know this was it for you?
So I started making that gradual
Mm.
switch. For 2 years, I still was trying to do the insurance bookstore thing,
Mm.
but by the time I'd tinkered with the bookstore for 2 years, I could see the progress it was making. I could see the trajectory, and I says, I'm all in. And
Mhm.
so I jumped in, and then I hired my best customer, who was a young woman who was very well read or whatever, got a toll-free number. My kids don't even know what a toll-free number is. They go, wait, you can just dial anywhere, can't you?
Yeah,
No, it was like a toll-free number.
yeah.
What do you need that for? Well, because it costs 30 cents a minute to call in, and you didn't want to
And they
have
go,
to.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
You
So,
go, well, like at a payphone. What's that? You know.
yeah. So started doing direct mail because there's no internet, but direct
Yeah.
mail pieces and everything, and it just started taking off. And again, people would continue to ask for books that were out of print, and so I had not only new books, I had used books.
Mm-hmm.
But my budget was like $5, so it's all like
Mhm.
$5 and $10 stuff tops. A year goes by, I start adding some $20 books, then $30 books, then $50 books, and after $1,000 book here or there. You know?
Mhm.
So, but I'm still working like 18-hour days because the more work I did, it would be a little left over. I gave up a lot of extracurricular, but
Yeah, I would think you did.
it took, but after a decade, it's like learning a foreign language. After a certain time, you knew it was there. Okay, I can see that. I got this.
Mm.
It's a train on a track. It's going. I just,
Mhm.
okay, what can I do to make it even better? And then I was recruited to run a chain of bookstores for a while.
Oh.
And, that was fun for a few years.
Mhm.
And then, but then really when you're running multiple, you're a big babysitter. You're putting out brush fires in 15 different stores,
Mm.
20 different stores. And so just ventured back. But then about 20 years ago, Amazon, Kindle, ebook, digital, we said, ooh, this new book is going to be a tough battle.
Yeah,
But,
I'm not crazy about those.
but
I like to hold the book.
yeah, but my used book sales were going up about the same pace they were falling. So I'm just steady. But I said, if I can just step away from the new
Mhm.
and focus on this. And so I started really making that transition. 2005 is when I remember. So 18 years ago, I started making, and it's been very fortuitous
Mhm.
because the books I have, people aren't pushing by it now 10,000, 20,000. They want to see the book, feel it, touch it, hear the story, and its emotion, and they go, that's what I want. And I mean, it took another 10 years after that. And then really in the past 15 years, I hit this level to where it's like, okay, I'm in rare territory now, literally.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And
That's for
now
sure.
there's very few people in the world, and most of us know each other.
Yeah. Well, Barnes and Noble doesn't need a vault, so you're onto something. You're doing well.
Although I was in Dallas recently and walking down and in Barnes and Noble, because I stop at
Sure.
Barnes and Noble.
Why
I love
not?
bookstores.
Mhm.
And guy walked by and then he came back, and I'm thinking, and it was awkward. Where'd I know that guy from? And then he comes to me. Are you the TikTok guy?
Are you the king of books? Yeah.
Oh man, we all talk about you.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Oh, that's great.
So
Wow. That's got to make you feel good.
yeah. Well, if you think about it, if you have any interest in books,
Mm-hmm.
TikTok algorithm is pretty good. It's going to throw my videos out there for you.
Yeah.
So because and what subjects do book cover? Everything. So what subject we talked about? Everything. So if you're talking about that, you're eventually going to show up on somebody's page, and so and FanX this weekend. I mean, just everybody. Oh, I follow you on TikTok, and I was saying, wow, this is a lot of people. But then from the numbers, you go, well, you would expect it to be, but then it's just like there's the end receiver. This is who's seeing your thing. And so many of them came up to me. One very tender person came up and she basically said, you basically are my father figure, because my dad was not a nice guy.
Oh.
And I had lost, anytime I would see an older guy, I would think of my dad, But you have now replaced that I get this. I wish you were my dad. I wish you were my grandpa. I just want somebody to tell me stories like that. And I don't have that person in my life. So I'm feeling that for a lot of people.
That's wonderful.
Okay, I can feel good about that.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, just time after time, just want you to know, I don't let my kids watch TV after a certain hour, but I will let them watch your TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, these are parents.
Man.
And then, and just lots of people. There's a lot of lonely people out there or whatever, and they feel like they just need to connect to somebody. And they say, you're very calm and reassuring, and I just want to listen to you, and so, that's all the incentive I need to just keep doing it, because the bookstore, does well, pays the bills. And so I didn't think a year and a few months ago that social media would make that big of a difference, because, I was out there doing the other ones out there, but now it's it makes a huge difference.
Wow, congratulations. Congratulations across the board too. I mean, there's nothing better than finding a passion for something and then pursuing it and cultivating it so well that you not only make a living but bring happiness to others. And so I feel like I should give you a round of applause, because you're doing it.
Well, and my wife's a good sport about it too.
Okay, that
she
helps.
occasionally has to remind me, you do have a family, you're always running off doing this stuff. But she goes, okay, I'll share you this many hours a week with everybody else, But once you're home, you're home,
Yeah. And your favorite Batman villain, Bookworm?
I hadn't thought about that. But,
figured that would be a curveball for you. I got to throw one. Man, oh man. Well, Reid, I can't thank you enough.
It's been fun.
This is fantastic. Yeah.
Well, and always fun to meet people. We exchanged a few messages and everything, but to meet people, just makes it fun.
Now, who's your favorite author right now today?
I don't know that a lot of people will know. There's a couple that come to mind, relatively recent, like books I pick up just that I enjoy. One is Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, won the Nobel Prize for Literature, 1971, 72.
Okay, I'll make a note of that one.
Love his opening lines. Just, he does magic realism, is his writing. Doesn't mean magic.
Don't know what that.
But, okay. I just am pure enjoyment. Also, Umberto Eco, who did Foucault's Pendulum and others. That's the real Da Vinci Code. That book came out 10 years before Dan Brown.
Oh.
You read that one, and it's like, wait a second. Well, and he did Name of the Rose, and it's been translated.
Oh, yeah.
That's Umberto Eco. I mean, but his Foucault's Pendulum is what is, you would say, wait, this is like redone in whatever. But
I'll be writing these down.
he's really, really knowledgeable. I also like Steve Barry. Steve Barry does these stories about this retired CIA guy who then is an antiquarian bookseller. But then he goes and saves the world when he's not selling books. But it's the backstories.
A little Indiana Jones in there?
Pretty much, yeah. Those are like the ones just for let's see. Yeah, I have a little shelf of my like go-to. I like may as well Daniel Silva.
Oh yeah.
And
Rings a bell.
yeah, these all have to do. They take history and weave it into a story, and it typically has books in it somewhere. It's kind of it's not unlike Da Vinci, Dan Brown type thing, but but you go, wait, this is so much information. This like has to be true or whatever. But it's like, whoa, and but then Simon Winchester, just for like nonfiction, but he takes like the most mundane item, like one item, and makes it something that would be the greatest movie of all time.
No kidding.
Yeah, like Simon Winchester. Yeah, those. Yeah, so I mean,
those are your go-tos.
Yeah, those are to go to. But and believe me, I read a lot more. But those are just ones that came off the mind because those are ones I've been reading recently.
Do you like James Lee Burke? I'm pretty crazy about him.
You know, I can't say I've read any.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I probably like him because he's from New Orleans.
100 book a year pace.
Yeah.
I mean, now I do. I'll listen to books just because sometimes I just don't have something with me. But again, I'm a fan of the actual book.
Me too.
And
yeah, I live out of town, and I would listen to books on tape occasionally, going to work back and forth. You know, and that's nice.
Oh yeah.
And it's easier, and you don't get in a wreck because you're reading and driving. You know.
Yeah. Well, I used to drive out in the desert and stuff, and my wife finally made me promise to not stop reading while I was driving.
Yeah. There you go. Well, that's a good idea. Oh my gosh.
There's no cars.
Yeah, that's true. We're out here a little bit, aren't we?
Well, it's beautiful. Can tell you, never a ticket, no, and I've never tried to get out of one. Have I deserved some tickets?
Maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Your secret is safe with us. Oh my gosh. Well, I just can't thank you enough for doing this.
It's been fun.
On your Sunday.
Yeah, sure has.
Yeah.
Oh, you should tell where to find you.
Yes.
Well, my last name is Moon. I sell rare books, so everything is Moon's Rare Books. At Moon's Rare Book, TikTok, at Moon's Rare Books, Instagram, at Moon's Rare Book, on every social media, YouTube. I do YouTube longer content.
Oh, awesome.
I do longer content, and I'm going to be more active in that too, just because it lends itself well to that format. I'm still even on Facebook. That's mostly that's more for my family and stuff. But I do have a bookstore page, but I've really focused on the TikTok is my number one go-to, and been able to get over 2 million followers in 14 months. So
that's awesome.
Wow.
It's about 5,000-6,000 a day. So
wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And it's rewarding to see that when you do a video and then it takes off. And
Well, I can assure you, you'll be getting dozens off of this. So we're gonna get you over the top here.
That'll be great.
Fantastic. Reid Moon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great stuff.
Well, thank you for joining us. That was Tuned In with Jim Cummings. We had Reid Moon today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, you can find us on Patreon for bonus content. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.